Today we're talking about the Soviet Union's last secret. And no, it's not Area 51, it's Transnistria. Let's start with some modern-day footage of hammer and sickle flags and Lenin statues to really set the scene here. You're not in 1985, you're in Transnistria, a place that legally doesn't exist, at least according to the United Nations. Transnistria is a breakaway statelet in Eastern Europe with around 450,000 people living there. Let me give you a quick history lesson. During the Soviet era, it was part of the Moldovan USSR. However, in 1990, when Moldova declared its independence from the crumbling Soviet Union, Transnistria's leaders were worried that Moldova was becoming too friendly with neighboring Romania. So they wanted to declare independence too, but they weren't quite ready to go full breakaway just yet. So instead, they asked the UN for permission to hold a referendum on independence. But secretly, they already knew what the result would be. They wanted to declare independence, but they needed a way to justify it. Enter stage left, the Russian military. With the help of some Russian soldiers who were stationed there at the time, they organized a civil conflict between Transnistria and Moldova. It wasn't very bloody, but it was enough of a mess to get the UN's attention. Russia then sent in more troops to keep the peace, which is a totally normal thing for an occupying force to do. Just ask Poland or Germany. Anyway, this led to a frozen conflict that is never really thawed. Fast forward to today. Transnistria isn't recognized by the UN or any other countries, but it functions like a real state. It has its own currency, border guards, a time when many ethnic Russians found themselves living outside of Russia proper, and when Russia was desperate to maintain its influence over its former subjects. So, one of the last remaining frozen conflicts in Europe. And if you want to know more about international relations and global politics, stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching. Situation where there is simmering but not active conflict, in which there is no peace agreement, but there is also no war. And finally, it's a blatant disregard for international law. Russia's continued military presence in Transnistria is a violation of Moldova's sovereignty and the Budapest Memorandum that Russia signed, agreeing to respect Moldova's territorial integrity in exchange for giving up its nuclear weapons. Passports. If Russia feels threatened by NATO's eastward expansion, it could use Transnistria as a way to push back. After all, it's only 450 kilometers from Romania, a NATO country. On the other hand, Transnistria is so tiny and unimportant that it's unlikely to provoke NATO unless Russia makes a big deal out of it. In that case, it's probably best to think of Transnistria as a frozen lake. You can skate on it if you're careful, but one wrong move, and you could find yourself under the ice. Everything you'd expect a country to have. Of course, it's backed by Russia, who still has troops stationed there. Some reports say up to 5,000, so why does Transnistria still exist? That's a complicated question. It's a relic of the Soviet Union's collapse. But what does this mean for the future? Could Transnistria be the next flashpoint in the conflict between NATO and Russia? Well, it's certainly possible. If you liked this episode, check out my other videos on the Soviet Union's collapse.